Okay, so I had a couple questions about the Common Lit assessment questions at the end of the Monkey's Paw story. So I want to go over the questions with you. Okay, number one, which statement best expresses the theme of the story? So remember, a theme is a statement about a lesson that we're supposed to learn, a big statement about life, about people, things like that. So that's what we want to think about. What should we have taken away after reading the story? What should we have learned? So, is it going to be A, it is not wise to trust strangers even when they promise to be loyal to you? B, ignoring the wisdom and experience of others can lead to terrible consequences? C, you should never give up even if you think a problem is impossible to solve? Or D, you can overcome tragedy if you rely on your family and friends? So I like to always use the process of elimination when going over questions like this, like multiple choice questions. So I know right away that A is not going to be the answer. It's not wise to trust strangers, even when they promise to be loyal to you, because the sergeant didn't ever promise loyalty. There was nothing like that. So I know right away it's not going to be A. Then I have B. Ignoring the wisdom and experience of others can lead to terrible consequences. Maybe, because terrible consequences did happen, and there was experience from the sergeant major, and maybe wisdom. So I'm going to think about that. C, you should never give up, even if you think a problem is impossible to solve. I don't know. I don't think that really goes with the story. So I'm going to get rid of C. D, you can overcome tragedy if you rely on your family and friends. Well, the only tragedy in the story was the death of Herbert. And I'm not sure she overcame it. I'm not sure Mrs. White overcame it. She tried to make another wish, but Mr. White did something, we assume made another wish to prevent that from happening. So I think our best choice is B. Number 2, part B. Which two quotes from the story best support the answer to part A? So we said that part A said that you should listen to the wisdom of others. So we need to find two direct quotes from these choices that support that theme. So A, as he began to talk, the little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of strange scenes and doughty deeds. B, I won't, said his friend doggedly. I threw it on the fire. If you keep it, don't blame me for what happens. Pitch it on the fire again like a sensible man. C, likely, said Herbert with a pretend horror. Why, we're going to be rich and famous and happy. Wish to be an emperor, father, to begin with. Then you can't be henpecked. Then we have D. Mr. White dropped his wife's hand and rising to his feet gazed with a look of horror at his visitor. His dry lips shaped the words, "How much?" £200 was the answer. E is, but the days passed and expectation gave place to resignation, the hopeless resignation of the old, sometimes miscalled apathy. Sometimes they hardly exchanged a word, for now they had nothing to talk about, and their days were long to weariness. And F, go and get and wish, cried the old woman, quivering with excitement. So which of these options best show us that we need to listen to the wisdom of others? So if we look at these closely, we can tell that A is not about listening to other people. It's not even about wisdom, so we can get rid of A. B is definitely wisdom. That's the Sergeant General telling them, you need to get rid of this. C, Herbert's just being silly, so that's not wisdom. D, Mr. White dropped his wife's hand and rising to his feet gazed with a look of horror at the visitor. His dry lips shaped the words, how much? £200 was the answer. Well, let's see. Wisdom. Maybe because that's the consequence. So we get to see that he should have listened to the Sergeant General. But then we have E that talking about just kind of how the things were, so there's no wisdom there. And F is where Mrs. White wants to make that other wish, so there's definitely not listening to the wisdom there. So I think our best choices are B and D. Okay, number 3, part A. How do paragraphs 63 through 72 contribute to an understanding of the mood at this point in the story? So remember, the mood is how we feel as the reader, and setting can help create that mood. Is it A, the create a suspenseful mood with details about the old man's nightmares and Mrs. White's concerns? B, they establish a cheerful mood to show how the family feels about their wish being granted. C, they build on the gloomy mood that was established in part 1 of the story. Or D, they show that the mood has changed from disturbing to lighthearted. So for us to be able to answer number 3, we have to look back at those specific paragraphs, 63 through 72. So if we start up at 63, they sat down by the fire again while the two men finished their pipes. Outside the wind was higher than ever, and the old man started nervously at the sound of a door banging upstairs. A silence unusual and depressed settled upon all three, which lasted until the old couple rose to retire for the night. "I'll expect to find the cash tied up in a bag in the middle of your bed," said Herbert as he bade them good night, "and something horrible squatting up on top of the wardrobe watching you as you pocket the ill-gotten gains." He sat alone in the darkness, gazing at the dying fire and seeing faces in it. The last face was so horrible and so simian that he gazed at it in amazement. It got so vivid that with a little uneasy laugh he felt on the table for a glass containing a little water to throw over it. His hand grasped the monkey's paw, and with a little shiver he wiped his hand on his coat and went up to bed. The brightness of the wintry sun next morning as it steamed over the breakfast table, Herbert laughed at his fears. There was an air of prosaic wholesomeness about the room which had lacked on the previous night, and the dirty, shriveled little paw was pitched on the sideboard with a carelessness which betokened no great belief in its virtues. "I suppose all old soldiers are the same," said Mrs. White. "The idea of our listening to such nonsense! How could wishes be granted in these days? And if they could, how could 200 pounds hurt you, father?" "Might drop on his head from the sky," said the frivolous Herbert. "Morris said that things happened so naturally," said his father, "that you might, if you wished, attribute it to coincidence." "Well, don't break into the money before I come back," said Herbert, as he rose from the table. "I'm afraid it'll turn you into a mean, avaricious man, and we shall have to disown you." His mother laughed, and following him to the door, watched him down the road, and returning to the breakfast table, was very happy at the expense of her husband's credulity. All of which did not prevent her from scurrying to the door at the postman's knock, nor prevent her from referring somewhat shortly to the retired sergeant major's of biblious habits when she found that the post brought a tailor's bill. "Herbert will have more of his funny remarks, I expect, when he comes home," she said, as they sat at dinner. So we have to think about the mood, how it was in the beginning of those paragraphs and to how it changed. So they create a suspenseful mood with details about the old man's nightmares and Mrs. White's concern. No, not really. They establish a cheerful mood to show how the family feels about their wish being granted. No, they're not really being cheerful because the wish hasn't come true yet. They build on a gloomy mood that was established in part 1 of the story. Maybe. And D, they show that the mood has changed from disturbing to lighthearted. Maybe. So if we think about how it was in the beginning at paragraph 63, there is a bit of disturbing with that, seeing the monkey's face in the fire and the monkey's paw on, in the monkey's paw there, and he shivered when he touched it. And then actually at the end of that is where they're being silly. Herbert will have some more funny remarks. So the answer for number 3 is D. Number 4, part B, which two details best support the answer to part A? Well, here you're going to go through and see which two direct quotes from paragraphs 65 through 72 best support the fact that it went from disturbing to cheerful or happy. How does the dialogue in paragraphs 78 through 94 develop the plot of the story? So you're going to do the same thing we did for number 3. You're going to go back to paragraphs 78 to 94, and you're going to review those paragraphs. And you want to think about, does it reveal that Mr. White's wish has been granted, but not in the way he expected? Does it show that the visitor is uncomfortable with what he has to say, even though he's bringing a gift? Does it suggest that Mrs. White is concerned about her husband and takes steps to help him deal with the news he received? Or does it show the sergeant major reappearing in the story and causing more problems with the family? So you're going to pick one of those answers. Number 6, Part A. What impact do Mr. and Mrs. White's differing points of view in paragraphs 109 through 125 and paragraphs 133 through 139 have on Part 3? So what you want to do here is, you're going to go back to those two sets of paragraphs, 109 to 125 and then 133 through 139. They are numbered, so you should be able to find them. So you want to look at how Mr. White is looking at things versus how Mrs. White is looking at things. So this is at the end of the story after Herbert is dead and when Mrs. White wants to wish him back. Okay, so which one of these options shows that difference? Their differing points of view and resulting argument creates suspense around what choice they will make and how they will respond to the knock at the door. Their conversation resolves their disagreement and differing points of view, and it helps the story end in a hopeful way. Do their different points of view contribute to a lively but humorous dialogue between them and reinforces the characterization of them as a close family? Or does their different point of views about the sergeant major emphasize the idea that visitors are threatening, which is an important theme in the story? So if you were paying attention, you should be able to eliminate one of those answers. Hint, hint, answer D, because that is not the theme. Okay, number 7, Part B. Which two excerpts from the story best support the answer to Part A? So remember, you're going to read these answers, and you want to choose the two that best support the answer to number 6. Okay, number 8, you're going to type out your answer. How does the author use foreshadowing to contribute to the story's overall meaning? Explain at least 2 examples of foreshadowing and how they develop the theme of the story. So we know the theme of the story because that was the answer to number 1. Now, if you did yesterday's assignment about foreshadowing, you should have 2 examples of foreshadowing that you can use in this question. So, how do those 2 examples tell us that people should be listening to the wisdom of others? Okay, so there are lots of options to choose from. You want to make sure you follow that kind of race strategy. So you're going to start with your claim sentence, which uses restating the question and answering the question. So there are many examples of foreshadowing in The Monkey's Paw. There are 2 examples of foreshadowing that help develop the theme of you should listen to the wisdom of others. So you can start it with something like that.